Thank you all. Again, my name is Arif. Can I see?
Do you need this?
Can you? Well, let's see some pictures of me.
Here you are.
Is this me? Is this me?
No.
Is this me?
No.
Is that me? That's me. Yes. This is me. I don't fit in that suit anymore. This is me on Prince Street in Northbrook. I think we have one photo here. Is that right? This is, notice the 1980s short shorts. Oh my goodness. I'm ashamed to be here. I'm seeing those now. This is my sister Nusrat and myself on the swing set that my grandfather put together when he came to visit us in the backyard of our house in Northbrook. And this is first grade. Is this me? Is this me? Is this me? No, this is me. Yeah. I and Taro were the ethnic diversity of our first grade class. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Oh. This is more of me. Okay. Oh, there I am, right here. Oh, there I am. Again, there's Taro and myself. We're the only ones. And so what I'd like to do is tell you some stories. Sue gave the perspective of a white person, a Caucasian person, with respect to housing in neighborhoods in Chicago. Lowell did that for African Americans, and I will do that for everybody else. That's kind of what I do. What I do when I travel the country and overseas and perform and share my stories. I have two jobs. One is to represent 1.2 billion Muslims in the world, because I'm Muslim American. Number two is to represent 4.3 billion people who are darker than beige. That's basically what I do. So as I travel and I perform, people often meet me for the first time and they'll say, Arif, where are you from? I know what they're asking. The more sensitive way of asking that question is, can you please tell me about your ethnic heritage or your cultural background? But I answer honestly, I say I'm from Northbrook. That's where Ferris Bueller is from. They might try a second time and say, no, Arif, where were you born? Chicago. I was born at the corner of Western and Division in Chicago, at St. Mary's of Nazareth Hospital. My father practiced medicine. But it's not the answer they were looking for. So they might try a third time and ask, no, Arif, I mean, how did you learn to speak English so good? I reply, how did I learn to speak English so well? Same place you were supposed to, school. So sometimes the questions people ask me make me feel like I don't belong. One morning, it was a Saturday morning, I was a junior in high school, and I was sitting in the auditorium of the school, and we were at those cracker-sized desks, one that flip up and down, remember those? And I had a number 2 pencil in my ear, another one sharpened in my fingers. And I was filling those tiny bubbles. I was taking the SATs. And I was drenched with sweat. Because my parents, my teachers, my friends, my family were all telling me that this test would determine the rest of my life. So I filled in the bubbles for my name, and I came to the first question. And it said, the following question will not be scored, is for informational purposes only. What is your ethnic origin? Well, then I took a deep breath and I was calm, I was cool, I was collected. Because I knew the answer to this question. It might be the only answer I get correct on this test. Too bad it's not being scored, but I knew that answer. So I began to read the answer choices. There were 4 choices. A, white, B, black, C, Hispanic, and D, other. So the answer was not as apparent as I thought, so I began to do what Ms. Jensen said in English class. When you come to multiple guess, not multiple choice, she did not have very much faith in us. When you come to a multiple guess question in a test, you should begin to eliminate the wrong choices first. Come to the last 2 that might be correct. Do a mental 50-50. Flip a coin in your mind, choose one, and hope for the best. So I began to do that. A, white. Was I white? No. B, black. Was I black? No. I'd actually asked myself that question once before. When I was 5 years old in kindergarten, it had rained the night before, and we were playing during recess, the boys and I. We were playing the sandbox. And because the sand was wet and sticky from the rain, when we put our fingers into the sand, it felt kind of squishy. We liked that feeling. So we put our shoes and socks off, we took them off, put our bare feet into the sand, and squished it between our toes. And we began to play with our Tonka trucks and make sand castles and hills and stuff for the trucks to drive around. And after playing for a few minutes, we got all this sand all over our pant legs. So we dusted ourselves off, and rolled our pant legs above our knees. And after a few moments, I noticed one of my friends, Timmy, that he was staring at me. He's staring dead at me. He's looking at my knees. He'd never seen my knees before. And he asks me, very subtly, he says, "Arif, are you black?" I froze. I looked back at all my friends, and it hit me. All my friends were white. They were Caucasian. They all had sandy blonde hair, and light brown hair, and blue eyes, and green eyes, and freckles. And I looked down at the dark skin of my hand, and I knew that I was not white. This was back when my favorite cartoon was Fat Albert. And I knew Fat Albert was black. And I knew that I was not white. But I wasn't sure that not white meant black. So I said to Timmy, I said, "I don't know, but I'll go home and ask my mom." So late that day after school, I'm sitting in the kitchen with my mom. I'm watching the monsters out of this eye, looking at my mom out of that eye, and trying to figure a subtle way to ask my mom that question. You know, are we black? Can't think of a good opening. I just blurted out, "Mom, are we black?" She says, "No, we're not black. We're Bangladeshi." Oh, okay. Very next day at school, the boys and I are playing during recess again. We're playing tag. Timmy is it. He's trying to tag me. He's chasing me all over the playground. Up the slide, down the slide, up the jungle gym, across the jungle gym, down the jungle gym. He catches up to me in the corner of the school playground, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Ha ha, you're it. Hey, where'd you find it from Mom? Are you black?" I said, "No, we're not black, we're Bangladeshi." He said, "Bangla what?" I said, "Bangladeshi." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "I don't know. But I'll go home and ask my mom." But by the time I was taking the SATs, I knew the answer to that question. I was not black, and I was not C, Hispanic, and I filled in the bubble for D, other. And let me tell you, when I filled in that bubble, I kind of felt like I was now officially the other. But I was Bangladeshi. And so what I learned at that time, from 5 years old to high school, is that who you are ethnically, or by faith, or by cultural background, or by language group, is not something you learn overnight. It's not just downloaded into you. You learn it slowly over time. And so here's what I learned. That my father, when he was born in the 1920s, that he lived in one place. But the name of that place kept changing. He was born a British subject, part of the colonial India, the British Raj time of India. And then in 1947, you know the story, you've seen the great movie, Gandhi, that it was split into two countries, India and Pakistan. Okay, so if you think of this landmass like this, here's a huge geography lesson in like 30 seconds flat. So here's this landmass called British India, right? It's very ethnically and culturally diverse, almost like Europe. Different language groups, different faith traditions, people of different territories, warring kingdoms prior to the arrival of the British. But in 1947, at midnight, it becomes two countries. India in the middle for Hindus, and on the sides, Pakistan here, and Bangladesh over here, which at the time was East Pakistan, it was part of Pakistan. And that worked for a little while, until when people in Pakistan were trying to impose the language Urdu on people in East Pakistan who spoke a language called Bengali or Bangla, and that didn't work for a while, so then in 1971 this became its own country, Bangladesh. So my dad never moved, but he was a British subject, then he was a Pakistani citizen, and then he was Bangladeshi. So he came to America in the 50s on a fellowship. He got a Fulbright travel fellowship to come and practice medicine in America at a Methodist hospital in St. Louis in June, July, and August. And he had done that after spending some time in the University of London practicing medicine there, or learning to advance in medical studies. He died almost of pneumonia there, and so his professor said to him, "This is not the country for you, and you want to do brain science, you should go to America." So he went to that Methodist hospital in June, July, and August. And he'd almost died of pneumonia in Britain because it's cold and snowy and wet and damp. And so after doing that fellowship, in St. Louis in summer, he then later came to America and did a medical residency at Stanford University as one of the first non-whites at Stanford Medical School. Wow. In June, July, and August. And then he got a plum job at Loyola Medical Center in Chicago, in Maywood. And he came to Chicago in June, July, and August. And then September and October came around, and November and December, white stuff started falling out of the sky. He had seen that before in England, and he thought, I've got to get out of here. Okay. But at the time he came as a Pakistani citizen, he went back to East Pakistan to talk to his father, who said, no, go back to America, earn be a doctor, send money back home because a civil war may be brewing. We may want to become our own country, and I don't want you to be here during that time. Okay, so my father stayed in America and earned. My mother and her family lived through the war. Later, when my father went to go visit his father again, when he was getting up in age, and when you're a Bangladeshi Muslim guy and you're getting up in age, there's an international network of aunties who are looking for you to get hitched. So word was given out in the world, the Muslim marriage mafia got together, aunties spoke, and he met my mom, and a few months later they were married. He came back, and she came, and they lived in Maywood in a small apartment. But my mom was lonely because my dad would work 14-hour shifts, and she would just wait for my dad to come home. And then I was born, and so they wanted to live in this one apartment building in Uptown, in what's now the Boyer Park area. And the reason why they want to live there is because those of you who have lived in Chicago your entire lives, you know Chicago's a great place to live. There's a lot of ethnic neighborhoods, right? Koreatown, Chinatown, Little Italy, Little Village, etc. Sue talked about her neighborhood, Lowell talked about his neighborhood. There was no Bangladeshi neighborhood. But there was this one apartment building where there were 5 Bangladeshi families living there. Now, in the entire tri-state area of Chicago, you know, there's only 12 Bangladeshi families, so this was a gold mine. So you can think of that apartment building as like Bangla Tower. So my dad rigged some paperwork and he got to live in that building because he actually had too much income to live in that building. But he wanted my mom to spend the day with other Bangladeshi women to speak Bengali, the language that they grew up speaking. The language that Bangladesh kind of fought a civil war to be able to speak. And so our dads would go off to work in the mornings, and our Bangladeshi moms would gather us kids together, and they'd spend the day. And they would trade their specialty Bengali recipes. Like my mom would teach the other aunties how to make a really good morok pulao, which is a roasted chicken with a rice pilaf. Another auntie might teach the aunties circle to make what's called rosgullah, which is a ricotta cheese ball dipped in a sugary sauce. I refer to it as instant diabetes. And so then the kids, we would all watch, you know, TV together and play with our stuffed animals. We'd watch Sesame Street and Electric Company. And then, you know, my sister was born. And the two of us were in this 2-bedroom apartment, like maybe a 700 square foot apartment, bouncing off the walls, chasing each other, yelling, singing the Flintstones theme song, and the neighbors would complain. So my father figured, you know, they need a yard, you know, for them to run around and play in. So he found this patch of land in Northbrook, and he built a house there. So then we went from this small 2-bedroom apartment to this 3,000 square foot suburban house. And my sister and I went from playing with Bangladeshi kids every day, Bengali kids every day, to now kind of holding up in this suburban house, looking up at all the older white kids through our windows, because they all seem so huge. I mean, I'm an adult male, and I'm like 4'11" in heels. You know? So we're short, small, elven people, Bangladeshis, and these kids were like huge. I mean, so we would look at them and just watch them play, and we wouldn't play. I played with my sister a lot. We watched a lot of TV, you know. And I later learned that they had all gone to pre-K together, you know. And their moms knew each other. My mom didn't know their mom, so my mom homeschooled us before kindergarten. Actually, when I went to go give the interview for kindergarten, my sister Nusrat was with me. We were only like 11 months apart. She was answering all the questions faster than I was. You know? And it's because my mom overcompensated. You know, as the mom of an immigrant family, she wanted to make sure that we spoke English very well, that we read and wrote English really well, and we knew how to do arithmetic before we got there. And my mom's, no matter what I do, I'm a CPA, I'm getting an MFA, I do this stuff, social justice work, my mom could care less about any of that. What her pride and joy is that I got the Palmer Award for Best Handwriting in first grade. She has it framed somewhere. And my sister tried to throw it out a couple years ago after my father passed away when she was kind of decluttering, but my mom will hold on to that. She could care less about my board examiner CPA award. Forget about that. That's, you know, the piece de resistance. You know, and as a mom of an immigrant family, that's what we did. We overcompensated. Now, the very first day of kindergarten, I learned that some other boys, somewhere in Northbrook, kind of looked like me. Even though in my neighborhood, I was the only brown-skinned boy, I learned that there must be some other boys somewhere. Because the older kids that day, that very first day of kindergarten, said to me, "Are you Gopi's brother?" I didn't know who Gopi was. But I later learned there's an older Indian boy. His name was Gopal. His parents had come to America from India. And he lived in the northern part of Northbrook, and I lived in the south side of Northbrook. And so I never met him. And then I learned in second grade that his name was not Gopi, and it wasn't a nickname. His name was Gopal. And they called him Gopi as an insult. And then I started to realize, oh, that kind of explains how sometimes I'm not able to play all the games with the other kids at school at recess. The older white kids might make fun of you if you're different. And that's when I wanted to no longer be different. But I look different. I'm obviously different from the other kids. And my house always had constant reminders of how different my family was. Because in the TV room, my mom had this huge record player that always played patriotic Bengali music. And then every room in our house had these tapestries or wooden woodcuts of Bangladeshi vistas, of fishermen fishing, farmers farming, and the kitchen always smelled during dinner time like the smell of simmering yellow lentils. You know, when I went to my white friends' houses, they didn't have any of that stuff. So I was different. But then my brother was born, my brother Said was born. And my father had always kind of figured that he may go back to Bangladesh one day when there'd be more opportunity for him as a doctor, but there never really was. Or sometimes, you know, in all new countries, there's political turmoil and instability. And so Bangladesh in the 80s wasn't really all that stable for the first part of it. And so after my brother was born, my father figured Arif's born in America, he's American. Nusrat was born in America, she's American. Saif is born in America and is American. Let's stay in America. Let's all be American. So that's how my family came to America. So it's a slightly different story because we came to America. My mom and dad flew on a plane and became American citizens. They had to become naturalized. And so sometimes because I look different, I've been made to feel different. But you know what? Like Sue said earlier in her story, is that there's a game of perception. I have to admit that even though I was made to feel different, I saw those in my neighborhood as different as well. See, I learned that as the eldest son in an immigrant family, what I was a cultural anthropologist. What I would do was go out into the indigenous population, and I would gather data, and I'd interpret it for my parents. Okay? So I used to see white people on TV, white people in my neighborhood, white people at school, and I thought that all white people were the same. But then one day in kindergarten in December, I learned that there was two ways of being white. Because after our coloring time, we sat down in a circle on our mats in kindergarten, and we learned to play with this four-sided top. And you'd spin the top, it'd fall to a side, it had these strange markings on each side, and then based on what side it fell on, you could win these pieces of chocolate wrapped to look like gold coins. And that's when I got excited. We can win candy. This is better than Candyland. That game is false advertising. This actually is a game where you can win candy. And that was called the dreidel, that little top. And then later in music class that day, we learned to sing the dreidel song. If you know it, sing along. I have a little dreidel, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh dreidel I shall play. Now I thought that this was a game and a song for white kids, because it's something that I didn't know anything about. But then I saw my friend Christopher didn't know much about dreidels either, and I said, Chris, you don't know about the dreidel song? He says, no, I'm not Jewish, I'm Christian. Now that was the first time I heard those words really. So I started to talk to my friend Christopher, and what does that mean? And I talked to my friends who were Jewish. Joshua, what does that mean? And I started to, figure out, oh, you're okay, and you, and all right, then you, then you don't, and then you do, okay. I started to figure out that in my little kid brain, the difference between Christian and Jewish, my friends who were Jewish really had a raw deal. Because my friends who were Christian, they had candy for all their holidays. They had Christmas cookies and candy canes and marshmallow peeps for Easter and chocolate bunnies and my Jewish friends only had that little gimel, that little candy for And my Christian friends, they had cartoon characters and mascots for all the holidays. They had elves and Santa Claus and reindeer and the Easter Bunny. Santa Claus. One year, my father's mother came to live with us in Northbrook, and she had left Bangladesh. She had never left Bangladesh before, a majority Muslim country, for America, which is basically a majority Christian country. So that December, we started seeing all these images of Santa Claus everywhere, on billboards, print ads, on TV. She saw this robust man with a big bushy bearded mustache, clothes from head to toe. She thought that Santa Claus was an imam, a Muslim cleric. Because the Taliban wore red. They might look at Santa Claus, right? Instead of beige or black. And I said, my grandmother said, no, Santa Claus is not. What? He's not. He's this fat man who goes up skinny chimneys, and one night, all over the world, he goes to every kid's house and he gives them toys that are made by these little tiny people called elves in the North Pole. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And that's when I realized that all of our stories, when you're not in the out group looking along the inside, they all sound kind of weird and crazy and stupid, right? So I was a cultural anthropologist. And the big disparity between my friends who were Jewish and my friends who were Christian was really evident in just the month that passed, right? During Easter and Passover time. When my Christian friends were coloring eggs and eating chocolate bunnies, my Jewish friends were eating unleavened bread. That's no fair. And then in class, I would learn to color menorahs and Santa Claus and you know, we'd give each other, you know, Hanukkah gifts and Christmas gifts. And I learned that I was learning a lot about my friends and their faith traditions. And they weren't learning anything about my faith traditions. You know, there was never like a coloring sheet of, oh, here's a mosque, let's color it. Oh, here's a prayer rug, let's color it. And that's when I started to realize that, I guess my job is to learn about them, and they don't really have to learn about me. And so I felt often overlooked and ignored. But September 11th happened. And then we were no longer ignored. I remember that morning, my mother shook us out of bed, my brother Saif and I, and she just grabbed us and took us to the TV room and flipped on the TV. And I saw those two towers. And thick black smoke was billowing out of the first of the two towers. I didn't know that it was New York. I didn't know it was the World Trade Center. But I just turned to my brother Saif and said, it better not be one of us. Kind of like what I've been saying all last week, right? It better not be one of us. It better not be somebody who calls themselves Muslim. My mother was frantic. She said, Nusrat's not answering her phone. Why won't she answer her cell phone? My sister Nusrat lived within a few blocks of the World Trade Center towers. She lived and worked there. And why wasn't she answering her phone? Back then, I was in film school, so I had landed this plum job working in a movie theater. So I drove to the theater that afternoon. I had to still open the theater. The owner and I were trying to talk to each other about, should we open, should we close, what do we do? We weren't sure what was really happening. But I got there around 11:30, and I flipped open the little black and white TV we have in the box office. Actually, the theaters in this town, Wilmette. I used to run the Wilmette theaters. Okay? So if you went there from 1997 to 2003, you probably saw me. I had a big bushy beard and mustache. Well, not for religious reasons. I was going through a hippy-dippy kind of phase. How big this beard was, I would like to show you, my mom would let me show you the picture. It was like the size of like Jerry Garcia and ZZ Top. Somewhere in between. How big this beard and mustache was. So I got to the theater and I flip on the little black and white TV and I see the first tower come down. And I also, like everybody else, was wondering what was happening. Who's doing this? Go upstairs, I thread up the movie on the projector, I listen to the radio, and they say the second tower comes down. I get back downstairs, the box office, I open up the candy counter for the candy people and the ushers, and then the news announces that the people that hijacked those planes and ran them into the two towers, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, the plane that went into the Pentagon, that those planes had been hijacked by Muslim extremists. And that's when I was choked with questions. I had to unbutton my tie and loosen it just to breathe. Why had these people done this? Why had they killed so many innocent people? And why were they doing it in the name of my faith, Islam? Because that's not how I was raised as a Muslim. And then my thoughts went to 1995 during the Oklahoma City bombing. When I was an undergrad at U of I in Champaign, when that bombing happened, some news reporters speculated that Muslims might be responsible. So people in nearby Springfield, Illinois burned down the mosque there and beat Muslims there. And I thought, what would happen now that people who so, vociferously claim to do this horrible act in the name of Islam, what would happen to Muslims now? And I had that big bushy bearded mustache. So my buddy, Rob, the assistant manager, said, Arif, we're getting complaints about you from the customers. Really? Yeah, they're saying that, you might be with the Taliban. Now, I don't know about you, but I think most of you learned the name and word Taliban that day of September 11th. I actually had been speaking out against the Taliban since 1997, when the whole thing happened in Afghanistan. They sort of, pulled down Buddhist statues and were part of World Heritage and culture. But no, most people didn't know about Taliban. I was like, Taliban at the Wilmette theaters? Like, what was I going to do? Confuse people with subtitled films? Get back at them with overpriced popcorn? But Rob said, people can do dangerous things, when they're afraid. You should shave your beard and mustache off. But I was in film school. I was kind of a hippy-dippy kind of guy. I was an artist, about expression and freedom of expression, so I didn't want to do it. So I was like, no, I'm not going to change my appearance for other people's prejudices. That makes no sense. I'm going to stand tall. I'll be okay with this. I went home that night. My parents said the same thing. This is not for religious purposes. This is just a fashion statement. Shave it off. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. Why should I change? That night, on the news, I hear that people who are Sikh, of different faith altogether, who wear turbans, beards and mustaches, were killed in Arizona and Los Angeles in retaliation for September 11th. They're not even Muslims, but people misidentified them and killed them. And I thought, shave the beard and mustache off. No point getting killed or injured for a fashion statement. The very next day, on September 12th, an angry mob of a couple hundred people were marching towards Bridgeview from neighboring, what's the name of the suburb now?
Bridgeport.
Bridgeport, yes, thank you. Bridgeport. They're going from Bridgeport to Bridgeview. Why to Bridgeview? Because there's a mosque there. My Uncle Jafar lives a block from that mosque. That's why it was in the neighborhood. So these white power demonstrators are marching towards a mosque, maybe to break windows, burn it down, beat Muslims. It's the day of September 11th. They're angry. Luckily, the police in Bridgeview, they surround the entire mosque with barricades. And my Uncle Jafar gets home after a long day at the hospital, and he sees an angry mob, a police barricade. His house is over there, the mosque. And he gets to the barricade and shows his driver's license to the police officer on duty and says, that address on this driver's license is that house right there, may I get through? Well, the police of Bridgeview were being very cautious. They said, we're not letting anybody through tonight. So he drove from Bridgeview 30 miles to Northbrook to spend the night with my family. So he couldn't get into his house. He couldn't get in. But his 3-year-old son and his wife were inside the house and they couldn't get out. And that's when I realized that now, after September 11th, people might look at me, my Uncle Jafar, my mom who runs the school lunch program in Northbrook, like my dad who's a physician, and might think terrorist. That we had been overlooked and ignored, and now we're all too visible. And that's why I share these stories with you. Because I believe that the power of storytelling is really at the root of how we're going to overcome these differences. That when you share your story with me, and I share my story with you, we find that we have more in common than you might think. Thank you very much.